hunting is a very hard thing to grasp, you know, for non-hunters. If you've never been around it, if you don't understand it.
Right.
But, you know, so for bears, for instance, like help control population, keep it at a healthy balance. So there's still plenty of bears around. Doesn't affect the ecosystem. I still get to hunt them, you know, so I want lots of bears. The meat is good. I love bear meat. And I enjoy it.
Jack, thank you for coming.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Bless it. You drove an hour up here. I appreciate you. You took the time. And you are the perfect person I want to talk to because you're somebody who saw some of the crap I put on Instagram and like a normal person, you struck up a conversation. I was like, God bless it. Here we go. Yeah. A normal person who's not just like, oh, you're trash. Like this is all trash. God. So thank you for coming. I appreciate you.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for having me.
So first off, you're like an avid bear hunter.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm an avid everything.
Avid hunter. Talk to me about bear hunting.
Yeah, man, I love bear. I love hunting all animals. So like any animal, I'm like, oh, this is one of my favorites, but they're all like the same. Bears are just cool. Bears are weird critters, man. They're different. They're especially old, big, mature bears. They've seen a lot of stuff. You know, bears can live super long, unlike deer elk. So I mean,
how long?
I mean, in captivity, they can live super long, but even in the wild, I mean, people have shot 25-plus-year-old bears before.
Damn.
Yeah. You know, an 8-year-old mule deer buck is ancient.
Yeah, right.
Ancient.
25 years for like a big ass predator is pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, like an old mature bear, you know, is 15 plus. That's a lot of seasons to survive.
Right.
Survived a lot of people. You crossed a lot of roads, probably.
Right.
Like there's a lot of ways to die as a bear. When you're young, you're getting, you know, cubs are getting killed by other boars. Young boars are getting killed by big boars. So yeah, if you're an old, yeah. If you're an old boar, you've seen some shit in your life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're old anything.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's one of the funny things. I used to be an SAT prep, right? And talk to people about hunting and stuff. And again, I'm not saying I was an avid hunter, but I talked to them and they're like, oh yeah, like I don't think like that's so cruel. Like how the fuck do you think a deer dies in the wild? Yeah. Do you think it just sits down in like a green pasture and like, I've had some good years. Like it's like, no, dude, it gets torn to shreds. Yeah. Like you've never met a gray haired deer ever because they don't exist.
Yeah. Or it starves to death in the winter and just freezes solid. Like, yeah, there's no easy life for an animal or easy death.
Do you remember that freeze in Texas like 3-4 years ago where they lost like 25% of the ungulates or something? They just froze to death.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
the
pretty
people
terrible.
were losing it. Like that was rough. They were not prepared for that.
No, I had a buddy who was actually in Texas at the time, and he had 2 little girls, like baby girls, like 3 and 1 or something, and they were huddled around their gas fireplace for days. They just had it going because I mean the gas worked, but they didn't have electricity, and yeah, man, that was not a good situation.
Yeah, it makes you realize how unprepared people are.
Yeah,
for anything.
Yeah, okay. So Killer Mike, the familiar with this guy? He's been on Rogan several times. He's a political activist. He's big in the black community.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, you know how I'm talking about. Yeah. Really, really well-spoken guy. Really interesting dude. He was on this panel at some point, and people were talking about like we need like a revolution. We need this stuff, and he's like, all right, let me see a show of hands. How many of you can grow your own food? And it's like, 10 people raise their hand. He's like, all right, how many of you can hunt for food? Right? This is like, you're not prepared for shit.
Yeah, literally.
Because you can't take care of yourself. You're talking about tearing down the system that you rely on for food and shelter. And you want to start a revolution? He's like, for what? You're not in a position to revolt. He's like, you got to go to, Albertsons and shop just like the rest of us. You're not surviving on your own. Seriously, I thought that was an astute point, man. I was like, oh, that's brutal.
Oh, yeah. Some of my buddies and I actually, as crazy as it sounds, we have plans.
We have plans.
Yeah. Oh, dude, me and my brother-in-laws, my dad I was making these plans with them. If something was to happen, and like all the wives and my sisters and my wife were all like, oh my gosh, just rolling their eyes. And I'm like, you won't be rolling your eyes on like day 7 when we already have the plan.
MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com. You know what's so weird about that? It's like no one... Okay, like we're planning for something we can't anticipate.
Yeah.
Right? And they're like, yeah, but like, what are the odds? It's like, okay, that's fine. All you got to do is look at how many cars drive on the road every single day.
Yeah.
Like, what are the odds you're going to get in a fatal car accident? Probably slim.
Yeah, slim.
Probably real slim.
Technically.
You still put your seatbelt on.
100%.
Right? So, like, why are you fighting this? Like, what about taking necessary steps in the event that the worst case happens is so unique from just putting your stupid seatbelt on? Like, you have your kids put their seatbelts on. Like, why wouldn't...
Yeah, I think the idea is so far-fetched that, like, people don't even want to think it's a possibility. Obviously, I hope nothing ever happens.
Yeah.
But I want to be prepared. Just like it's like, yeah, just like your seatbelt, like anything. Like, why not be prepared for it, regardless of what it is? Like, dude, I've kind of went down the rabbit hole on the end of. I mean, not to get totally off topic, but
we don't have
the end of end of the end of the world stuff. You know,
yeah,
it's whatever EMP, solar flare.
Oh, it's
grid getting hacked, whatever it is, right?
Sweating.
Whatever it is, it's like, dude, half the United States, if the power went out, would probably be dead within. I'm not joking. Like hundreds of millions of people would probably be dead within like a month.
No, within 72 hours.
Like if you're in a big city, you're dead.
Listen,
the looting starting within 12 hours. Like
even in normal suburban,
Idaho,
like Garden City. How many people in Garden City do you think have water supplies for more than like 24 hours?
Yeah, I mean, those people, they do. But as soon as you get down here to the valley,
what portion?
Large.
Okay,
in the mountain
50%?
Yeah, probably more.
Okay, let's say 60%.
Yeah.
Fine. That means that 60% of the people have resources to survive. The other 40% don't. What do you think the 40% are going to do as they're dying?
Yeah.
They're going to try to take out, like, they're all dead.
Yeah.
Like 72 hours, you're going to have like 25% of the people left, like bandaged legs, hoarding water and everything. Like, it's going to be terrible.
It's going to be crazy.
Yeah. So like the
solar, right? It's not, if our power grid got hacked, which is, start reading up on it, it's a very real possibility. Just say a power outage, just a mass power outage, half the country, your state for 2 weeks. I mean, it's unrest, just insanity.
Representative Hill, Ted Hill, Top Gun fighter pilot, really cool guy. He's the District 14 rep. Okay. He made this big, I talked to him in the end of February. He made this big point of going to Idaho Power and being like, hey, I want to see your security protocol. And they're like, what? He's like, I want to know who you're hiring. I want to know. It's like, or just tell me how you select people you hire.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't take a lot to knock all of this out. He's like, do you have physical barriers protecting like, transfer stations and you're like all these different things. They're like, what? And he starts digging into them. And I guess they clam up the lobbyists. He was saying the lobbyists for Idaho Power were like, what are you doing? What information do you want? He's like, I'm being very clear. I would like to know that our power supplies, which keep all of us alive, are secure. They're like, we're not talking to you anymore. So he couldn't, and this is a state rep that is going to them saying, hey, look, you are our utility system. Literally our lives are in your hand. If our water pumps go down, it's all over. We are talking about some dark shit here. Okay, so look, if the water pumps go down, let me ask you this. You're saying that it's something that's so unlikely, but we plan for unlikely all the time. Like every time you go flying, they go through the safety protocol. They go through the water landing. Like when I have to fly from Idaho back to, my former home state to see family, they go over water landing protocol. There's no water between here and there. I'm like, what do you mean?
Small pond.
So we plan for that. But do you think, I've always thought that the hesitation people have to plan for like end of the world stuff, like the power grid going down, is because just contemplating that creates so much anxiety that they're like, I can't even plan for this because it would be horrific.
They don't even want to think about it.
Right. Do you think that's really it?
Yeah, I think people don't even want to think about it. Because if you really sat one of those people down and were like, what's your first step?
Right.
This is what happens. What's your first step?
What's your first step? Yeah. God, that's dark. We have the water. Well, I shouldn't say that. Never mind. We have no water supplies. Don't come to our house. So just curious, what would your first step be? I presume you're pretty well provisioned.
Yeah. But, like we've went over this, like my family and a couple of friends, because one thing that's important is community. You're not going to survive by yourself. You need groups of like-minded people. You need people who are good at other things, like period. That's what you need.
Right.
You're not like, I have a 11 or 10 and a half month old baby.
Right.
Like, how am I going to protect my wife and my 3 kids?
Right.
And all my stuff. And
you need a like-minded, super tight community.
I mean, the more the better.
You need a command hierarchy.
Yep.
You need somebody who's like, okay, look, this is established. Yep. This is the way it's going to go. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we had a plan. We have a plan. My family, my brother-in-law and sisters, my parents, my wife's parents, certain people, it's like power goes down, no communication, right? Cell phone towers go down. Like, this is where we're meeting. It's this long of a walk. If you have to walk, get that, you do it immediately.
Right.
If it took a couple days, if you were that far apart, do it immediately, go back roads, walk, whatever. If it's EMP, no vehicles. So obviously if there's vehicles, you could drive.
Sure.
But EMP, no vehicles, do this. I mean, dude, one of my buddies bought a truck a couple months ago. He's like, that's my EMP truck. Because it'll work during an EMP.
Oh my God.
I got people that are prepared, dude.
But if you have that truck, doesn't that truck become a liability to you? Like, you remember that crappy movie War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise? They found the one van that would work. Yeah. And they're like, you got to stay away from people. And then they drove into a crowd of people and people got killed over
a bummer.
But
it's also a good means of transportation fast.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to get
we all talked. Yeah. We have a central place to meet like immediately. And then we have a final place to meet. And then we plan from there. But it's crazy. I love talking about it just because like I want to be prepared for anything. Right. So reason we talked about this before because we both are into martial arts. Like,
yeah. Right.
So reason I still train and I'm still in shape. So I can defend myself, I can defend my family, and I can defend people that need defending. It's the same reason I carry a gun every day.
Right.
Like, I don't want to ever use my gun, but I also don't want to need it and not have it.
Right. And the people an interesting point to that end is people that criticize individuals who carry guns. And I've had these conversations a lot of times. It's like, okay, that's fine. You don't think it's necessary for people to carry around a gun. That's fine. What do you do if something bad happens? They're like, oh, you call the cops. It's like, okay, why are you calling the cops? Like, well, because the cops will come and stop it. It's like, how are they going to stop it? They're like, well, they have a gun. It's like, right. It all comes back to stopping force. Yeah. Like, that's it. They're not showing up and asking nicely. They're showing up with undisputed force, right? Like, that's the nature of it. And the whole concept of concealed carry or just carrying a firearm, it's like, I want a cop in my back pocket. Like this is my own personal police officer, right? That I can move around and secure myself, and at least I feel a little bit better. Or like somebody who's like, well, I'll just call 911. They'll be there in 5 minutes. Like, okay, what if it's 20? There are problems that fall like.
What if it's 5? Right. A lot can happen in 5 minutes.
That's totally true. That's totally true. Even if it's like 2 minutes, if you're calling 911, you need somebody there right then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's dark stuff. Listen, let's get away from this.
Let's get away from
it. Listen. Talk to me about bear hunting though. Like, what is the big strategy with going bear hunting?
So like I'll never shy away from saying that I enjoy hunting and love hunting. Like a lot of hunters try to like kind of skirt around that.
Well, like apologize for it?
Yeah, kind of like I hunt for the meat. Yeah, that is a reason I hunt. I love the meat. My whole family lives off wild game meat. But that's not the only reason I hunt, I also hunt to control populations. Like you'll talk to people and they're, well, animals don't need, they'll control themselves. Yeah, when there wasn't, how many people are in the world now? 7 billion, I think, over 7 billion. Well, if you want to do that, like you can't live in a city, you can't drive a car. Like we've already affected animals, like period. We're here. So then you can control them in, as best way as possible. I want there to be animals because I want to continue to hunt them, as crazy as that sounds. I don't want all the animals to be gone,
Right.
you know? And that's a common misconception with hunters. It's like, oh, we're just like bloodthirsty, like people who don't hunt. Hunting is a very hard thing to grasp, you know, for non-hunters. If you've never been around it, if you don't understand it.
Right.
But, you know, so for bears, for instance, like help control the population, keep it at a healthy balance. So there's still plenty of bears around. Doesn't affect the ecosystem. I still get to hunt them, you know, so I want lots of bears. The meat is good. I love bear meat. And I enjoy it. Like a lot of people will they kind of skirt around that. And
I don't think like, look, you like fighting.
Yeah.
I like fighting. I like that I stay in shape. I like that I have community. I like that I develop mastery over something, but I still like fighting.
Yeah.
Right. Like at some point we get agency to be like, I just like this. I'm sorry I like it. No, I'm sorry you dislike that I like it. I'm not actually sorry that I like it. I don't look, I understand that there are some people that may criticize you, but I just think that's nonsense. It's like, I don't criticize you for buying chicken that was raised in a box and, you know, got its head cut off unceremoniously. Yeah. Like, I don't criticize you for eating eggs when, you know, half the eggs that get hatched are like male, you know, they're roosters and they just go down into some turbine and get chewed up. Like, I don't criticize, like, there are aspects of our world that it's like, you just have the benefit of participating in slaughter that you don't have to encounter. You are removed from it. And because of that, you think you're virtuous. Yeah. And that's not reality.
And honestly, how new is that? Where you weren't involved in what you ate.
Right.
It's fairly new. And if you go back in time on the existence of human being, it wasn't that long ago.
Right.
Like you had to grow your own food.
Right.
And kill your own food.
You had to participate.
Not that long ago.
Right.
Like my great grandmother just died a couple months ago. She was 102 years old. She lived during the Great Depression. She was born before the Great Depression. Like, was a little girl in the Great Depression. Like,
God, that's a tough time.
There was people alive when you couldn't just go to the store,
right,
and buy, you know, your food,
right.
So it's like it's crazy how fast we get separated with, you know, and kind of detached from all that stuff. But yeah, for bears, predators, just like anything else, have to be managed.
Right.
If you manage the deer and elk, you have to manage the predators as well.
Right.
And predators are touchy. It's way more intense. I've always said this. Like, you'll get the most hate on predators, like by far. I mean, there's a lot of hunting companies, which I totally disagree with, that won't share pictures of dead predators because they don't like all of the negative that comes with it. But I'm like, you got to educate people. I mean, you can only educate people so far, and then at some point, it's like, okay, you're not even willing to listen. So
there's a distinction. Like hunting companies are fine, or you're saying some outfits are fine showing like elk, but if you had like a wolf or a bear, they're like, no, we can't show that.
And there's levels even on predators. It goes like your hatred from the world is like, when it comes to predators, say the big three, you know, here in Idaho, it'd be bears, you're getting a bunch more hate. Mountain lions, you're getting even more hate. And then wolves, you're getting the most hate, you know, which is pretty easy because people look at their dog and then they look at a wolf and their mind can't like separate the two things.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, for bears,
that wolf would eat the shit out of their dogs though.
Oh, so fast. Would actively wants to.
Right. Right. Just give me a shot. Just give me a shot. Yeah.
But, you know, bears I've hunted bears with dogs. I used to have hound dogs. I bait bears, spot and stalk. Anyway, I really enjoy bear hunting. I've been fortunate enough to kill a lot of bears. Now I'm kind of at the point where I like shooting big old bears. I like the challenge of outsmarting an old, like we talked about, a bear that has, you know, been hunted for 20 years.
Do they get like far more clever the older they get?
Oh, they're so smart. They're like a different species. It's like a big whitetail. If you talk to a whitetail hunter,
sure.
The difference between a forky, you know, a little young 1-2-year-old buck and a 5-6-year-old buck, it's almost like they're different species. That's what bears are, especially like bait. Bait's one of the most effective ways to hunt a bear. You know, you're setting bait out, the bear's coming in. And it's not even easy, but it's a lot more simple to shoot a 1, 2, 3-year-old bear on a bait.
Somebody comes
Very
just for a
few
meal.
guys,
Yeah.
very, very few guys can consistently kill big, old, smart bears. Very few. I know very few.
So what's the process there? Because I assume they're not just wandering in for a free meal.
No, there's a lot. Like everybody always shows me, they'll set up a trail camera on their bear bait, which is a camera for people who don't hunt. It's motion activated, and it takes a photo or takes a video.
It's like a Ring camera.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Yeah. It's a Ring camera for hunters, really. And actually, if you're in places, which I never am, they actually make these trail cams that will send.
Yeah.
If you have service, it'll send a photo directly to your phone.
That's perfect. Or like an alert.
Yeah.
Like, wake up.
No, you'll get a picture of the deer that's walking in front of your camera. I never hunt in areas that have cell phone service because those only work in those areas.
Yeah.
But to set your camera up, a lot of guys, most guys will show me every year. They'll show me pictures of bears. They're like, look at this giant bear. I'm like, look at the time. 2 a.m. Has he came in daylight yet? No. He's been on my bait for 4 years. I have pictures of him. Never came in into the daylight.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, yeah, that bear's been on a lot of baits. This isn't his first rodeo. Like, he knows.
So what do you do? Like, all right, so they're dodging the bait, and they know to go in at night.
The time, yeah.
They know when you're not going to be around.
Yep.
They smile for the camera, and they move on.
Yep.
So then what do you do? It's like, all right, that strategy's not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't give away too many of my secrets. So
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. There's 2 rules of success. Number 1 is don't tell them everything you know. That's what I've said that forever. So I just bait differently. So I can say this. I put an absurd amount of bait down one time, and then I never want those bears to smell me. There's people who have methods of tying their sweaty shirt by their bait, so the bears get used to their scent. I don't want those bears to ever smell me. Like, I want them to come to my bait and feel safe every time they come there. Like, oh, dude, they might come at 2 a.m. the first time. And they're like, well, I don't smell anybody here. There's just food here,
Right.
But it's a process. I mean, it's hard to set the bait. It's like a 2-day. I mean, you pack 1,500 pounds of bait in on your back. It's a butt kicker.
Wait,
so a lot
1,500
of
pounds?
Yeah, so a lot of people don't want to do it. It's a lot of work.
Wait, you're talking almost a ton of bait.
Yeah.
Wait, how many trips does it take to do
many.
that? So many.
It's rough.
It's going to be 15 trips if it's 100 pounds, I guess.
Yeah.
That's a lot of bait, man.
Yeah, it's rough.
How long are these hunts? Like a week or something?
No, so the season in a lot of Idaho goes from, say, April 15th as opener to June 30th. And I mean, you put all your bait there, and I don't, a lot of people use a barrel, a 55-gallon barrel with a hole cut in it, and they put their food in there, and they chain it to a tree, and that's what the bear works at or whatever. But you got to constantly. That's how I used to bait years ago, and you're spending so much money in fuel alone driving up. I mean, I remember driving up on a Wednesday after work, 3 hours, getting there pitch black, hiking in, fill my bait, just to drive home to be in work in the morning.
Oh my God.
Not even hunting.
The commitment.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah, people think you throw some food down on the ground, a bear comes in and you shoot it. That's just what, it's another aspect of hunting people don't understand. It's like dogs, like hound dogs. It's like, oh, these dogs, you just get a dog and you turn it loose and it goes and trees a bear and then you shoot it out of the tree. That is like so far from the amount of time and effort and money that it takes to do it.
Right.
Like I said, there's so many different forms of hunting too.
Oh, sure.
And it's on a spectrum too. One of the things I despise is hunters that are like, yeah, I'll shoot a deer, but I would never shoot a wolf. It's like their answers are terrible. They like never once have I heard like a legitimate reason, So that's just I mean, hunters are just as bad for the hunting community in a lot of ways as non-hunters are, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, the bear bait, you know, people think it's simple, and it's so far from simple.
Did you grow up hunting predators, or like did you transition into that as...
No, my dad was my dad used to work construction all year and then trap. So my earliest in the winter for money. So my earliest memories in the outdoors was like my dad carrying me around on the checking traps on the trap line. And trapping's the most probably hated form of hunting, and the least amount of people do it nowadays as ever before, which is very ironic considering that's what this country was literally built off of.
Right.
Literally was fur trapping.
Right. The fur trade. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And that there's another super, you know, people have no idea about trapping. There's so many aspects, but granted, when you just see this stuff from the outside, it's hard. I'm somebody who can take a step back and look at these things through other people's point of view, you know? So you got to educate people. Like we say, you can educate them as much as you can. And if they don't want to hear it, they don't want to hear it.
Right.
But you have to try to educate people on all these things first.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But yeah, going back to bears, there's truly something special about an old bear. I mean, every time I shoot one, man, I'll just go up to it and just like looking at it, smelling it. Bears have a very unique smell. And, you know, just looking at their claws and their pads, and it would blow your mind how quiet a bear is. One of the quietest things in the woods, walking with those soft pads. Like sometimes I've had bears walk up within 10 yards of me while I'm sitting there and I didn't even know there. And then I'm like, oh, there's a bear right there. God. Yeah, they're a fascinating animal. Their nose is unbelievable, but their eyes are tiny, tiny. When you see a big bear, it looks like its eyes are like the size of a M&M, and they can't see very good. Like I'm just like hunting for me and seeing, like if you look at all of the things that make up these animals, like all the attributes they have to survive and all this stuff, it blows my mind. Still, when I think about it, it blows my mind.
Well, again, like you're hunting things that hunt, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like game recognizes game
Yep.
to some degree.
Yeah.
And again, it's you're dealing with the way human beings existed for forever, right? Until recently, which is trying to negotiate with nature, right? Trying to be better than nature, trying to first off not get killed by the thing you're trying to kill.
Yeah.
And figure out a way to navigate it so that you can actually win the day against it, which is just a wild thing, right? Like the concept of hunting something that can hunt you is just horrific.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because like out of the big three, you know, bears or black bears, I'm talking about specifically black bears, lions, wolves, mountain lions, and wolves. The only one of those three that worries me ever is cats. I'm still not that worried, but a black bear, I've had bears. I had a bear sniff the mic on my video camera once. That was probably 13 inches, 14 inches from my face. Yeah. I wasn't scared of the bear.
Right.
Like bears are not that scary to me. I've had a couple little close calls with sows and cubs. I was guiding an outfitting years ago, and I was guiding a bear hunter, and we actually had a sow charge into our blind. He had to shoot her with the crossbow in the face, like within 8 inches. That was the only time I've ever been scared of a bear. But besides that, yeah, bears, they're so spooky. Like they're not. People think grizzlies when they think of bears, right? And grizzlies are a totally different beast, you know. Right. Most of them will run though when they smell you, you know. So it's just the sows and cubs, or you know, you bump a boar that's on a kill or something like that. But bears are, not black bears are not that. I've never been like I'm not going through the woods like, oh, I hope I don't run into a black bear, you know.
Yeah, makes sense. So talk to me about wolf hunting then, because you hunt wolves as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's that process like? I was talking to a buddy of mine, Seth Simpson, who trains hunting dogs and whatnot. And, he was talking about the difficulty he had. He got hired by a rancher to help manage some wolves that were taking out some of the cattle on public lands. It was either public lands or on the ranch. Doesn't matter. But the point is, he was like incredibly difficult, and he hunted coyotes, all the time. And he does
probably one of the best coyote hunters.
Yeah, like unbelievable, right? And just hearing his process of coyote hunting without a firearm, just using his decoy dogs and then his jaghounds, and then it's wild to imagine that somebody could have such a relationship with their animals and have such a capacity to communicate effectively and be successful. And the joy for him, it was so clear. He's like, the probability is so low, but when it happens, it's so great because it's such a team relationship. Yeah. And I was actually chatting with my wife the other day about a video that Seth put up about he had hunting dogs that, ran a bear up a tree, and he was communicating with the dogs, and you could just tell the love he had for those animals when he was talking to them. Yeah. The success he had and the joy he had with engaging them. It's like, damn it, man, I want to go live.
Yeah. And that's why,
live like Seth.
As somebody who ran hounds, it's like, it's for a true houndsman, it's all about the dogs. Right. The animal is just a tiny little, most houndsmen, I would say they shoot 1% or less of what they tree for bears and lions. Mm. They're just doing it for the love of.
It's all about the chase.
Yeah. I think I've only ever killed, me or somebody else, I've only ever shot one mountain lion ever to my dogs in 15 years of hound. And then a few other people shot lions to my dogs. But 99.9% of animals I caught, I just treat them and freed them.
God, that's wild to have a team like that.
Because it's just great for I just loved it for the dog. Especially me, I raised every single one of my dogs from a puppy. So that's what Seth does too. And that's why when you see, dude, it's like showing your kid how to play baseball and then watching him go to T-ball and start cracking the ball off the tee, and you're like, yes.
It's so great. He put up a video recently of he had one of his decoy dogs, his black dog, just playing pickle with this coyote, just bringing it back and forth. And then camera pans over, and it's just he and his wife and his baby girl, and they're just loving the experience. Yeah. And the dog's loving it, like he's getting after it, boom, bringing the coyote, and the coyote's like 30 yards away. Yeah. And she's like brought it back from wherever the hell it was. And he's like, the dog knows what to do. He's like, yes, like just give me a shot. It's again, there's something visceral about it that again, I am not like a seasoned, experienced hunter, but there's a visceral thing about just watching it. It reminds me of fighting. Like it reminds me of like, yes, like there's a part of us that's made for this. And I feel bad for a lot of, like, for instance, for fighting, I feel bad for a lot of people who will never experience it. Yeah. Like I had a very dear friend who was in this men's group with me before I moved here. And in the 6 months before I moved here, he's like a normal 50-year-old dude. He's, like in financial world, and, he stayed in shape and everything. And he was like, I kind of want to try jiu-jitsu. I was like, oh, go. Yeah. Absolutely. Dude, the gym I train at, it's right there. Right. Like go down. So he goes down and he tries it. He does it for like a week. And I asked him the next week, like, hey, Ryan, how's it going? He's like, all right, I haven't been able to sleep. And I was like, well, did you, like, what happened? He's like, okay, first off, I have never been that close to somebody. He's like, I've never been close to somebody like that besides hugging my wife forever. He's like, I've never like wrestled around with some other dude. He's like, outside of being 10 years old, wrestling around with your friends. He's like, it's just, so there's that. And then there's the whole cognitive inability to understand what's happening. He's like, why is this happening? Because he's like, you make certain assumptions about your ability to push someone off or move someone around. He's like, all of a sudden you realize like you have no control over the situation, and it's horrifying. Yeah. He's like, and then learn the real trick is when you learn like the first move and it works. Yeah. And you're like, oh, there's a chance. Like I got a chance. Like I know a scissor sweep. Yeah. I know a this. I know a that. But it's so different. And he got instantaneously hooked. He's like, this feels right. Like there's something right about this. I don't know what it is. And he's still doing it. And it's great. And just to imagine him slogging through his days, like going over his book and talking to his clients and like just feeling totally detached from his body and his life and who he is.
Yeah.
And then to see him blossom, like, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. It's a beautiful thing.
In fighting, I think is similar to hunting. I mean, obviously there's people in both. There's people that's tried hunting and like, it's not for me. And there's people who tried a martial art and no, this is not for me.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, there's like, those two things, especially like physical and like combat and hunting, those two things are like ingrained deep within us.
You tap
We've
into
been
something.
doing those. It's primal.
Yeah.
We've been doing those things since the beginning of time.
Oh,
And
so
so you're
very before we were humans, we were doing.
You're
them,
meant. You know when you're doing it.
Right.
You're, that's why I don't think everyone should hunt. Like, we don't have the resources for everybody to hunt.
Sure.
But I would like it if everyone could go on a hunt, even with somebody else that hunted, to just understand it. Because there's no way you can really grasp it if you've never done it. If you've never, and you will never get to see the things I see or the experiences I have or the smells that I smell without doing it. You can go to Yellowstone, you can go to a zoo and see the animal. It is completely different, you know, and to really grasp it, it's just like you said about fighting. Like, and we're like talking men, I'd say 99.9% of men, whether they say it out loud or not, are overestimating their ability.
Oh, guaranteed. I'm 190 pounds. Okay. I used to be 180, but I put on 10. I'm 6'2". I walk, people are like, I could knock him out in a second. And like, yeah, maybe, like, I have no idea, but I do know if we get into an altercation, there's a 99% chance if you don't have a weapon, I'm winning.
No, because so few people are trained, especially at a high level.
Right. And by the way, I've never been I've never gotten into a street fight. Like, I don't value fighting as a means of conflict resolution. It's not my jam. It's like, listen, if we can't work this out, I'm just going to walk away. Like, there's no point where I'm like, oh, I know I should punch a guy, or like, I know I should choke someone. There was a
lot of people need that.
Yeah,
to be fair, it's not the right thing to do. It's not me as a Christian, and my attitude, the older I get, has changed a lot. And I wasn't ever out looking for a fight. In fact, once I could fight, it was way easier for me to walk away from things.
Yes.
I'm like, you can, like, words don't hurt me. These hurt.
Right.
Like, so, like, you can say whatever.
Right.
And you can go home thinking like, oh, that guy was scared of me.
I got the best of him. I really showed him. He's like,
in my heart, like, I know, and it's the truth of what would happen. So it's a lot easier to walk away when you, like, know. But nowadays, anyway, it's not even smart, because you're going to get stabbed or shot or something.
Yeah, there's this guy, world champion, Leandro Lo, who, like, I think it was a year and a half ago. He's in Brazil. He's from the favelas, won the world champion multiple times, one of the best fighters in the world. And he's at a bar, like, after training, nothing crazy, not like a crazy shot spot. He was there with buddies just having a beer. Some guy comes up talking shit, all this stuff, takes their pitcher of beer, pours himself a beer, blah, 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 blah. So Leandro just stands up, grabs the guy, chokes him, sets him down on the ground, like, fuck off, right? Guy stands up, takes a gun out, shoots him in the head, dead.
Exactly.
And the guy flees. They end up catching him. It was like, oh my God, none of it matters.
Nope.
Like, none of it matters.
Nope.
The risk engaged with getting in a fight. And what's worse is, I think the more effective you are at fighting, the more risk you are in an actual street fight.
100%.
Because when people,
somebody's going to realize real quick.
and they're going to get scared, and they're going to get defensive, and they're going to be like, I have to bring all the force. Like, if you hit somebody and you're like, pathetic, they're like, smack you on the ground. They walk away. They don't draw their gun. When they realize, like, oh my God, this guy can kill me. He just knocked me out. Like, I have to respond in some incredibly unreasonable way. That's, man, it's just,
you got to, nowadays you avoid it.
Right.
If you have to, it's got to be fast, and it's got to be violent, and then you need to leave immediately. If you have to do it, it's going to be violent, very fast, and then I'm going to leave.
Yeah. Yeah, but you just.
But like,
you can't
yeah,
get
when
in
your
fights.
family's there or anything
can't.
like that, you just can't.
You can't get in fights.
Nope.
You just, I don't mess around with that. Like
Nope.
it doesn't make sense. And again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm like way overestimating my ability to like defend myself, but I'm not going to find out.
You're trained, so you're not.
Like I've been a black belt for 10 years. I've had a lot of time
Yep.
working this stuff out, and it's just not worth it. Like it's something that I do. It's essentially something I do to find out about myself.
Yeah.
Like it's more of a religious practice where it's something that constantly humbles me. It's something that I can share value with other people. Yep. It's always like self-exploration.
Yeah.
And again, it does
you learn a lot about yourself
too,
huh?
You do.
When you're just tired and grinding and just getting just ragdolled by somebody who's bigger, stronger, better, you learn a lot about you learn about your heart. And it goes back to it's hunting too. Dude, I can't tell you how many times I've been packing an elk out. Elk are huge animals. Right. There's so much meat and you got to carry it off the mountain. I have literally been halfway out of like trip number 1 of 4 trips that I'm going to have to take to get this bull out. And it's hot and you couldn't be more exhausted, like physically, like in your mind. I've literally thought like, how can I physically even pack this elk out?
Right.
Like that's how heavy it is. That's how, hard it is. And I've literally questioned why I'm even before.
What
like I could do. Yeah, no, literally. I've had that conversation with myself hiking up a mountain. Like I could have bought some steak at the store. Like, what am I doing? And then as soon as you get the last load off, you're like, yeah, I want to do it again tomorrow. Like instantly. And that in fighting, that's why it's so important for people to train. You do learn a lot about what's up here. People are way more physically strong than they think, but it's up here that goes first.
Right.
Just like anything.
Yeah, I was training I think it was like 4 or 5 months ago, and I was training with this brown belt, right? And brown is right before black for people that don't know. Really awesome guy, very technical, very skilled. And I love encouraging those guys. It's like, yes, you're close. And even when they're close to getting me, I'm like, go, like, don't, because they start hesitating. It's like, don't hesitate. You're right there. So we get into a position. He's got this choke on me and it comes out of nowhere. And I get really surprised by it. And I start gurgling, right? So it's like, and I realized like, okay, here's the deal. You have 1 or 2 options. You can keep gurgling. He'll know you're close to the end. He'll squeeze harder and you're going to tap. Or you take 1 more breath and you stop breathing and you count to 10 and hope he gives up. Yeah. And dude, that was exactly what, like I took a last go, like, and then just held my breath because it wasn't a blood choke. It was a windpipe. And sure as hell, like I got to 7 and his grip let, he was like, oh, and gave up and I got it. I was like, man, you had it. He was like, well, you weren't, I couldn't hear. I was like, I was holding my breath. Like if you had waited 3 more seconds, it's just faith on both sides.
Yeah.
It's belief that if I stay calm, like you can't panic, stay calm. Yeah. It's terrible. And then it's a belief on his side that even if I'm not getting positive feedback, I'm doing the right thing. Yep. Like there were so many things that happened in that moment that I just thought like, God, man, where else can you deeply learn this stuff? Yeah. Like where else can you feel these lessons coming into action? Yeah. Like people tell you, like when you're in a bad spot, stay calm. Okay, well, how many times in the real world are you in a really panicky spot? Yeah. And it has taught me so much about how to stay calm. Yeah. It's like, just stay calm and think through it.
It's funny because I can correlate so much from fighting, any martial art, jiu-jitsu, whatever it is, to hunting. Yeah. Because there's so many times you're in the same boat. Like you said, he questioned whether or not, in jiu-jitsu, you're like, should I keep going for this choke? I might burn my arms out and not get it. Right. Or if I held on a couple more seconds, I'm going to finish it. It's the same thing hunting. Like, do I want to push myself over that next ridge? Like I'm physically exhausted. This is day 5, Right. Or you start questioning like, okay, the buck's bedded right here. My wind's good. Do I sit here in this horrible position for 4 hours with my back is like, I feel like it's going to break. I'm dehydrated. My lips are chapped. I'm getting sunburned, waiting for this buck to stand up, scratch his bed out so I get a shot. Or do I try to throw a rock over him to get him to stand up? Do I push it? Do I try to get a little bit closer? Do I, and it's the same thing. It's kind of a chess match, in jiu-jitsu. Yeah. It's that same thing. So having experience with both of those two things, I can always relate.
God, it's so cool. It's just, damn it, man. What an experience. So, all right, what is it like hunting wolves then? Because again, as Seth related, he said, and everybody I've talked to, Tom Snyder said the same thing. He's like, dude, it's hard. Like, it's hard to do.
Yeah, there is. I've hunted a lot of species. There's nothing like it. There is like the time and money and energy I have spent to be, I'm in a very small group of successful wolf hunters in the state of Idaho.
Right.
Like, based on how many I've shot, things like that. I mean, I only know a couple people, like not trapping, but just hunting them specifically.
Tom said something like, I think it was Tom. He said something like 50,000 people take out tags and like 300 people come home successful. It's some
it might be less. It might be less.
Okay.
And
as in fewer people are successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you take on how many people were wolf hunting and shot it, it's a fraction. Most people, incidentally, that's how most wolves are shot. They're deer elk hunting and they see a wolf and shoot it.
Oh, so the people that actually go out with the intention
if 300 wolves were shot, 1 or 2 of them on average a year were probably shot with somebody actually
going after.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
5 maybe. Like, yeah. Very, very few. So to actually go out saying I'm wolf hunting, and it's a success to go wolf hunting and see a fresh track. That's how hard it is. So if I was elk hunting and I went out for a day and all I saw was a fresh elk track, I would consider that. I mean, I love being out there regardless, but as far as elk hunting, that is not a successful day.
Right.
I've wolf hunting. It's like, hey, I was kind of close.
So
one was here at some point pretty recently. They might be 30 miles away in 12 hours, but.
So what is it that makes it so hard? Their capacity to travel?
Yeah, they travel.
Range?
Yeah, a lot of it, They travel so far, so fast. Other animals don't travel like that. Unless a deer, is migrating. They just do not travel like that. Wolves have a huge area. They gotta travel the whole thing. And to keep the other packs out, and they just travel so far, and I don't know exactly what the speed is, but they have this little lope that they do, and it just is so fast in all reality. Like, you'd have to sprint, and like, they don't get tired. They could do that for days straight. Like, I think they go something like 60 miles in 24 hours or something insane through like the most steep mountainous terrain. I tell everybody, it's like hunting a border collie, like the smartest dog you've ever seen. Like, that's what it's like.
Yeah, we were hiking a couple weeks back. Just a little hike, kind of neighborhood hike rather. My boys love it. Like, it's really funny. Talk about something they were built for. You get, and my boys like video games like any other kids. We took all the video games away, so like they don't have those options anymore. Thank God. But just like, they play basketball, they mess around, whatever. They enjoy the outdoors, but you get them on a trail, all of a sudden they are running in every direction. They are losing their minds. Like, they come alive. It's why my middle son, in fact, was like, I feel alive. He's 10. He's like, I feel alive. I'm like, we're 50 steps away from the car. But all of a sudden there's this river and he's like throwing or creek, and he's like throwing these rocks, and he's like, he doesn't even want to walk. He just wants to run. Yes. Yeah. It's beautiful to see. So we're going on this hike and we're coming back, and this guy had, it wasn't colleagues. I can't remember exactly what kind of dog it was, but he had 2 of them, and one of them was staying with him, and one of them was running all over the place. And just seeing this domesticated dog run up and down these hills at the speed he was going, just loving life, just no problem. I was like, dude, if I was chasing that dog, there's no way I would
3
catch
minutes,
him.
And you're like, couldn't breathe.
Oh my God. Like, he didn't care at all. Like, and he was, again, going up and down these hills and just messing around, and then would disappear. And I'd see him like way over on it. And then all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, he'd be like, he's like coming around the corner. It's like, where did you even come from?
That's wild.
And that's a domesticated, dumb little, like, just neighborhood dog that was running around a trail. Like, to imagine a wild animal like that, there's no way. You have no chance.
Yeah, it's
pretty wild.
And that's exactly it. Like, it's funny when you look at your dog, because how much tougher your dog is than you. Even these pugs and dogs that are like it would blow your mind how fast that dog will turn wild if it has to survive. It's not just going to lay down and die. If you dropped it off in the woods, it's going to be catching squirrels way faster than you think.
Well, I got a French bulldog. He's not going to do shit.
Dude,
he's just
yeah, maybe a pug and a bulldog. Yeah. But for the most part, your average dog.
Yeah. Seth sent me a video of my French bulldog playing with his coyote.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, it's just giant rack of teeth. And he was being nice, right? They were actually playing. But my French bulldog was like, you're such an idiot. Like, you have no idea what you're doing. And the French bulldog just thought it was another dog he was playing with. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, wolves are, man, it took me, I had a journal when I started hunting them. And it took me, I had no idea what I was doing. So obviously hunting him down here is very new. Alaska, Canada, they've been hunting them forever. They trap them and they do bait piles. That's how they hunt them there. But as far as like calling them, and there was almost zero information out there. Tom has a class now. It's like the only real information I can think of. Tom teaches a wolf hunting class.
Yeah,
that will definitely. I recommend it. Tom knows what he's doing when it comes to wolves, and it will drastically cut the learning curve. But when I started, there was nothing. Zero info. You could learn about hunting any animal besides wolves like that. And so, I mean, I just basically was like, oh, I'm going to wolf hunt. And then, so what got me started, I actually called 2 in when I was spring bear hunting. I was trying to call in a bear, and I called 2 wolves in. One was 10 yards, and the other one was 15 yards, and they just stood there. It was wild. It's my first experience with wolves. I have it on video. It was like amazing. You know, it's like this mythical animal because you just don't see them, you know. Right. And to see them there, and like we were way back in this mountain, and it was amazing, you know. The season wasn't open. We had a rifle and a bow. Would have easily been able to shoot both of them with my bow, like easily. I just was, after that, I was kind of like, okay, I want to figure this out. It took me over the course of 4 years. I spent 69 days in the field before I got an opportunity at one. There was days where I drove 3.5 hours woke up at 2 a.m., drove 3.5 hours, hiked for 15 miles in the snow in the winter that day. Didn't see a track, didn't hear anything. I was just setting up calling. I didn't really know what I was doing. Drove all the way home and then woke up and did it again.
Oh my gosh.
Like, just, I spent so much time and money. And I honestly, after a while, I was like, is there actually wolves out here? Did I even see those two, or did I make them up in my mind? Like, I don't know if these exist, you know. Every once in a while, I would hear one, though, when I was out, or I'd see a track, or I'd find a kill, and I'm like, dang. And so, yeah, on day 69 in 4 years in the field, I actually missed. I snuck in on these 2 that were howling, and they were bedded, and I snuck around. The snow was really loud, and I jumped them before I got there. Rushed the shot, missed. And may have shed a tear. I don't know. I was by myself, so I don't know. Nobody will ever know. And then didn't hunt them the next year. I was so discouraged. It was like seeing a unicorn for the first time, you know? And then after that, then I was like, all right, I'm going to do it again. I started hunting a little bit. And my first wolf, my wife, I was working, so I couldn't go. My father-in-law took my wife elk hunting. She shot a bull. And it's a freaking pull to get in this canyon. It sucks. We've packed a lot of elk out of there. It's rough. My wife's she's so tough, dude. To just go in there and shoot an elk in there in the bottom of this is just crazy. And she's packed a lot of elk out of there with me. And that's
awesome.
She shot a bull, and so I got up that night and we were gonna go in there, and I'm like, man, I've seen wolves in there before. I'm like, I'm packing my rifle. I didn't want to pack a rifle. I know I was packing an elk out, you know. I had 2 trips into there, and it was gonna be. I think my wife was pregnant with our first kid, so she couldn't pack anything. She could hike in there, but we didn't want her to pack any weight. Yeah, she was pregnant with my first son. And we got in there. I packed my rifle, and I'm like, if I pack my rifle, I'm not going to see a wolf, and I'm just going to be pissed when I'm packing the elk out that I packed my rifle around, you know, an extra 10 pounds.
Yeah.
And we got down there, and wolves started howling, and so I ended up calling one in. I shot it across the canyon, and I actually called all of them kind of down the hill, and ended up shooting one, and it was like crazy. Like actually shooting one, I was like, man, this is like the pinnacle of animals, you know? And then I just started spending more time and just started figuring them out. The only way to do it was to spend time.
Right.
Like there was no, even still, you could take those classes and they're going to help, but you got to be out there, you know? And then I just started to learn about them, and I started to see them more often and call them in more often. I started filling tags, and then just learning about them, and just my respect level for them went up huge. They're incredible animals. They're so good at what they do. They're so smart. They're so effective at killing. I have so much respect for wolf. It's probably my favorite animal, honestly. Not only to hunt, but just like they're amazing. I think they're beautiful, which is hard for people to be like, well, how do you think they're beautiful and can hunt them, you know? But the time I've spent too has made me appreciate them. Like this is not easy. There's a reason they poisoned them to get rid of them, and you know,
right?
Because that was the only way you were killing them. Period. You're not hunting them to extinction.
Right.
No way. No way. They could give everybody 10 tags a year. Wouldn't change anything. The same amount of wolves would get shot every year. Trapping is by far the most effective way, and even that is extremely difficult. So just the more time I spent around them, the more time I've watched them. I've got to watch them a lot. Just do their thing, you know. Hunting. I've watched them chasing elk. I've watched them surrounding elk. I've watched them just messing with elk. They had a dead elk. One time I watched this pack surrounded this herd of elk, and they'd lay down around them. All the elk are just butt to butt, you know, scared. And the wolves were laying there. Some of them would fall asleep. Some of them would stand up and stretch and play with another one. And the wolves are just death. The poor elk are just deathly afraid. The wolves are like, they'd come in and bite one by the ankle and stuff. And I'm just watching this. They were way too far to shoot. I had just shot one out of this pack a week before, so I knew I had to be careful on how I called them because they're so smart, you know. I didn't want to educate them. And pretty soon, they just got up and left the elk, went down this valley. I watched them go up, and then I watched them bed and start eating on an elk they had killed that night. They had already just killed an elk.
And they were just messing with
They were just messing with them.
God, what a flex. They're like, I'm going to take a nap here as you're terrified for your life.
Yeah.
I'm just going to.
And I've seen these elk. I've watched these elk. I've watched these wolves run 200 yards from elk. And these elk are so used to wolves now that I've watched the elk just sit there and watch them. Not run or anything. Like if the wolf turns and goes, the elk doesn't stand a chance. Especially when there's snow, you know. Those wolves just float on top of the snow. If there's a little crust in 4 feet of snow, those wolves just float on it. And the elk just post hole through, you know. There's no chance in the winter.
Yeah, right.
No chance. And those elk are so used to it now that they're just like, well, he's not chasing me, so I'm not even going to run. Literally, I've been howling with elk, or with wolves from different ridges. I can see the wolves were howling back and forth to each other. And there's elk below us just feeding. Half of them don't even lift their head. It's almost like they're like, well, we're dead if we
listen,
get
Johnny.
So there's no point.
If it's our day, it's our day.
Literally, they're like, there's no point in doing anything at this point. But yeah, just watching them just do. You know, I do. The more I've watched them, the more I understand. Like, they're dogs. They play with each other like dogs. Their tails do different stuff when they're acting different. You know, there's a hierarchy in the pack. You know, I've seen the alpha male or female be outside of the groups. They're all jumping on each other, playing, howling, having a good time. And one time I watched this wolf had accidentally bumped the alpha male, and he just turned around and just chewed on it for a second. And that other wolf
I'm sorry,
like,
Dad.
oh
I'm sorry.
Gosh,
oh
no,
my God,
literally.
I'm sorry.
Like there's the dynamic of a pack is crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're dogs, man. They roll around. They do the same thing that a canine does, you know? And so that's why I can look at it and understand why it affects people so much of hunting them, because they see it and they see their dog. And don't get me wrong, besides an elk bugle, In the woods, I mean, obviously, my kid saying "I love you, Dad" is the best sound. But in the woods, an elk bugle and a wolf howl for me are at the same level. It's the most unbelievable, like to your core, give you goosebumps, best sound you can ever hear. So I mean, I understand why there's people that are like so passionate about not killing them. They're just looking at it from just such a narrow point of view.
And that's the big piece, which is look, we all have to dance with each other, right? And there's a reality that if we let just whatever takes its course, that may not end up being a positive result for people that are here right now, dealing with things right now. And the responses, of course, well, the wolves were here first. It's like, that's fine, but we're here now, right? And like, I'm on team human, right? I'm on team, let's manage what we have. Yeah. And they're like, so for instance, my stepmom's dad, my grandfather, step-grandfather, he was a game warden in Montana for like 20, 30 years. And they would talk about how when there weren't enough predators and the deer overpopulated, they would drive places and you would just see these deer over the winter that were too weak. They were trying to jump a fence. They were too weak to make it over. And they like front half made it, back half didn't. And then they just starved to death and then froze to death on these fence lines. Yeah. And it's like, you'd see hundreds of them, hundreds of these animals just rotting away. Right. Hang on a second. Damn light turned off. I got it. Just like, I got you. There we go. I need you. Yeah, there you go. And dude's like, so what's the right thing to do? You have those were in years when the deer overpopulated, right? They got too weak. There weren't enough resources. A bunch of them died and froze to death, starved to death, strung up on this fence. Is that compassionate, right? Is that the way? Okay, well, maybe the fence shouldn't be there. Where the fence is there. Yeah. Right? Like, let's deal in reality. Yeah. Right. And another big reality that I think people need to acknowledge that are in defense of wolves, which is fine. Like, I think it's great to love to hunt them. I think it's great to love them and think they should be conserved. Like, that's fine. But a big reality is like, hey, look, we still need to manage them so that our love for wolves or the conservation we want to provide for wolves or animals in general, because it's ironic that we love one animal and don't give a crap about another one. Exactly. Right? Like all the vegetarians in the world who think you should never kill an animal don't care about the does and all the other animals that are killed in creation. Yeah, right. Of like their soybeans and stuff. Yep. But the bottom line is like, we do need to manage this in a way that will not prevent or meaningfully damage other ways of life that also exist, that are also valuable. Yep. And that's the piece that I think people get stuck up on. It's like, hang on a second. People aren't bad if they want to hunt elk. And people aren't wrong if they're saying, hey, the place I used to hunt, the place where my grandpa used to hunt, my dad used to hunt, I can't hunt there anymore. And that sucks for me. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And again, I've had a lot of people say, okay, but like, let's look at state level numbers. And that's fine. Like, if we're talking in the abstract, like, are elk going to be killed in Idaho? Like, are they going to be wiped out to extinction? No, that doesn't appear to be the case. But it is the case that we have land management issues with public versus private land. That's painfully obvious. We have out-of-state buyers coming into the state, buying up large ranches and then cultivating elk that are included in the state level count that people have no access to. So from a practical standpoint, it's like, all right, we'll take out those 1,000 elk because nobody can get a hold of them, right? And it is true that it has meaningfully, the wolf populations have meaningfully affected and shifted populations of huntable elk. Oh, yeah. And that's just it. Yeah. So it's like,
and the problem is that's a fact. Like, and the problem too with a lot of the studies that I've heard some, your other guests,
for sure,
guests use as like success rates. You're missing insanely important things with success rates. So first of all, technology. People can hunt longer, harder.
Right.
They can shoot further, more accurate. There's more information on how to hunt correctly. So first of all, no matter what, the success is going to go up because of all those things. Period.
Right. and to be clear, I'm saying right as in that makes sense. This is not a perspective.
No,
I'm not like, oh yeah, I know.
No,
Like,
I'm just
that
saying,
makes
like,
perfect sense.
You could take
like,
that out of hunting.
Right. If 30 years ago we had 10,000 elk harvest and now we have 10,000 elk harvest, that's not necessarily making a commentary on the population, considering the average hunter is far more equipped with far better technology.
It's not even close, right?
Right.
It's
like makes perfect sense.
It's like a jiu-jitsu guy now.
Right. Compared to 40 years ago, they'd never seen a berimbolo.
Right. Half of jiu-jitsu is new. Like it's still evolving.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't compare the two.
Yeah. Understood.
It's like MMA. It's like, think about a world-class fighter right now, who's ever the champ in any weight class in the UFC. Think about him fighting the champ 15 years ago.
Right. And the classic example is Hickson. Like, full respect, incredible. Like, no questions asked, undefeated, and heralded in to the world stage a form of MMA that is fundamental.
Yep.
But we don't know how Hickson in his prime would do against the people in the UFC in their prime now. The training is just different.
It's different.
Like,
and they're good at
science is
everything.
different. They're good at everything. They're not one-trick ponies.
Yep.
They're not, like, that's a very astute example.
So and then another thing so Idaho is a cool example because we have the Frank Church Wilderness. It's the largest wilderness in the lower 48. So it is the largest area that has no roads, you can't even push a cart or ride a bicycle into the Frank Church. It's millions of acres. Like, it's like insane how big it is when you see it on a map. And that's a perfect example. They released the wolves right there. If you look at the data in that area of success rates, it's drastically gone down. They've cut, and then you got to look at multiple layers of it too. Like, there's only 20% less bulls have been shot. Okay. But there's not 200 cow tags available there anymore because there's not the population to do it. So you can't just look at one thing. You have to, at any of this kind of thing, there's so many layers to it.
Right.
Another thing with success rates is you can say, well, yeah, all the remote stuff doesn't have elk in it anymore. The wolves do not like people. They don't want to be by people. But the elk have learned the closer you are to people, the less likely you're going to be killed by wolves. So they've moved down, which, guess what? That's going to mean more people are going to kill elk because there's more push down. A lot less people want to go deep into the backcountry and hunt elk, So there's so many different layers of it that it is undeniable. And especially if you go out, like, anecdotally, you can go out to multiple areas. And I'm talking guys who've elk hunted for 30 years, who spend more. A good buddy of mine, Russ, you should have on the podcast, but he just the things he's seen. That guy has been in so many different units, so many different areas, and the elk numbers, it's not even remotely the same. Moose, the best indication is moose. We've cut moose tags statewide drastically. There's a lot of units, there's not even moose tags anymore when there used to be 5 moose tags in there. So, you can obviously go to the low zone. It's a perfect example. Right.
Every time I put something about hunting online, it's about low and Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Like, those
it's a perfect example.
1 and 2 spots that people reference.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. That's a perfect example of it. And I'm a little different than most because I have so much respect for wolves and I want to continue to hunt them and I want my kids to hunt them, that I want there to be wolves on the landscape. I don't want to eliminate them. In fact, another thing that most people don't bring up is we had wolves in Idaho. We didn't have very many, but before the reintroduction in 95, we had wolves here. I don't necessarily, I'm not a biologist. I can't tell you if they're a different species. Technically,
right.
They're
There's
labeled.
A large discussion about if it was a timber wolf or the pounds and the
Yes.
there are a lot of discussions on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Granted, I don't believe in necessarily evolution from a point of that's how we started, but there is changes in animals, right?
Sure.
If you have to kill moose in Alaska as a wolf, the biggest wolves are going to survive. They're going to have the best chance at killing a giant bull moose.
Sure.
So over generations, the wolves are just going to be bigger. So, but we had wolves in Idaho. I actually know my father-in-law saw one. I have multiple people who have heard them howl or seen wolves, like 100% wolves, not coyotes. These are hunters. You know, a lot of wolves get mistaken for coyotes often. But because wolves are so territorial, and so that's why they kill people's dogs all the time. Hound hunters, I have multiple buddies that have had all their dogs killed by wolves. And wolves are just doing what wolves do. There's other canines in their territory, and they're going to come kill them. That's how wolves survive, right? So those wolves that we had, those native wolves, those were the first things that died. They got hunted and killed by the wolves when they reintroduced wolves.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so there is no native wolves here. I don't believe, I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I don't believe they interbred or anything like that. I think they were hunted and killed because we didn't have that many. And then the moose population. So you go from the wolves and then the moose got hammered. Moose are they're an easier target. They can't run as fast as an elk. They stand and fight. Like they're dying fast, you know? And then you go to the elk and the deer. And I mean, there's a lot of wolves that are just the elk. There's so few elk now that they're killing deer. A whitetail is a crazy fast, you know, hard animal to catch. And I have buddies that hunt wolves in Montana and all they eat are whitetail.
Wow. So what do we do then? Because look, I think, and I was telling this to somebody else, I don't think the frustration and criticism of wolf reintroduction that hunters have is mutually exclusive with data points that say, hey, if we look statewide, including private property that you don't have access to, the population is fine.
Yeah.
So these things are not mutually exclusive. For all the people that are saying, hey, fuck the wolves, you've destroyed my hunting ground. And then the other people saying, okay, but the wolves haven't destroyed the elk population statewide. These two things are not mutually exclusive. Exactly. They can coexist. But what do we do then? Because the question is, all right, well, like, I'm glad the elk are not statewide destroyed by the wolves, but you still have large swaths of the population that now don't have access to hunting, which is a real bummer.
Yeah.
Like that's not a positive thing. No. So how do we,
and I'm all for private land ownership.
Sure.
This is America.
Yeah. And that's also not right. I'm not advocating like, oh, let's eliminate private property rights and stuff. Yeah. And it sounds like there are obviously pieces of legislation that have to allow for like reasonable hunting or reasonable access and things of this nature. But like, what is the solution? Because you're bringing in such a fair perspective, which is, this is a great animal. Like, it's an incredible animal. It has also caused problems, but it's also not something that, you know, you would advocate necessarily for eradicating. So like, how do we manage that? And is another problem that somebody brought up to me, and they're like, look, he happens to be younger guys in his early 30s. And like, listen, I started hunting when I was 18. He's like, I don't have any problem with wolves because I never experienced the Idaho and Idaho hunting before wolves. Yeah. Right. He's like, everything I've hunted. And he's like, I hunt every single year. He's like, I take elk every single year. It's no problem. But that's because I have this perspective of like, this is how hard things are, or this is the way things are. He didn't have hunting areas that were eradicated. All his hunting areas and his, you know, haunts and wherever he goes, it's like, he's always managed to do it with wolves. Right.
Yeah.
So is it the passing of a generation that will eliminate the criticism, or is it reworking legislation or the way we manage wolves that will fix it, or is it both?
Yeah. I think the management is key. They're here. They're on the landscape. We're not getting rid of them. So it's the management, and we can get into the whole, you know, what the goal number was. You know, we're 1,000 percent over what the goal was.
Right.
Which
They wanted
is
something like
interesting.
150 or something.
Yeah, which is interesting because I don't know how they were gonna do that. Like in my opinion, that was kind of just there as like make it sound good, but it was an impossible feat the way they move and travel. But the management and to not tie hands. I mean, they just changed a rule they just cut a trapping season. Trapping is way more effective on managing wolves. Like there's way more wolves trapped in Idaho than shot. Actually, I don't know if it's way more. But like it's at least 50%.
Gotcha.
Like you'd have to check the numbers on it. Foundation.
I won't hold you to it.
Yeah. Foundation for Wildlife Management is, I don't know if you,
I've invited
talked to Tom about any of those. Okay.
Yeah, and again, I've invited them. Like the invitation stand, and I understand. Being newer to the conversation, I completely understand. People are like, I'm not going to go talk to that guy. Yeah. But again, the invitation for them stands. Again, bringing people to the table and just look. I'm not trying to argue with you.
Yeah.
Like we need to put our heads together and understand. Like there's a lot to be said for there are criticisms around the concept of a bounty system, right? And I know that's a criticism that some people have for the Foundation for Wildlife Management, but at the same time, I also appreciate that here are hunters and citizens that they're not asking for government help. They're just like, hey, we're going to work on this.
Yes.
If you're saying we can manage them, if you're saying we can get tags and go out and get them, then like we're going to do that and we're going to support people doing that. And we're going to do it privately and we're going to do it by the law.
Yes.
And like that. And I like that. Even if I was a wolf crazy, which I'm not, I'm like, have them all, have a million of them.
Yeah.
I like the fact that here are people that are saying, hey, look, we want this end. We're going to support people that do this. We're going to educate people that want to do this. And that's where we're going to move.
Yes.
It's like, God bless it, man.
Yes, because Foundation for Wildlife, first of all, it's not a bounty. It seems people think it's a bounty.
Yes.
So
to be clear, and I'm not trying.
I'm just clearing it up. You're getting reimbursed for your wolf hunting expenses. I just told you how hard it was and how many days I spent in the field. I spent I have spent tens of thousands of dollars wolf hunting.
Yeah.
And so it's to reimburse the people. And you go to trapping, you have in Idaho, you have to check your traps every 72 hours legally. So if you have to drive 3 hours every 3 days,
3 days, yeah,
and then run your sled and do all that to, if you did okay, you probably caught 2 or 3 in a season. That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
It's all out of your pocket too.
Yeah. And I really want to be clear. If I misspoke and said that foundation, it has been described like it is a pseudo bounty system. I understand there's a difference. I'm not saying that's what they're doing.
Yes.
I like the idea that you reimburse and we just participate, right? Like that's, to me, it's the ultimate participation. I have a problem. I'm going to participate in the solution. And that's great. Like, God bless it, man. Like, here are people that don't like something that's happening and they're going to play by the rules and we're going to solve it together. Yeah. Right. But it's like just that idea. It's like, hey, let's set up a reimbursement system. Let's train people.
Yeah. Because it's funded by hunters.
Right.
That's who's paying it.
Right. Like this is a beautiful thing. And again, I'm not advocating for the eradication of wolves. I'm just saying that this is the type of thing that people have to put their heads together. You got to figure out what the right thing to do is, how to manage these, and the issues that older hunters have that experience hunting in Idaho pre-wolf introduction. Yeah. Their criticism is valid.
100%.
Right. And I think a lot of the miscommunication comes from when people say wolves have completely destroyed elk, and then people are like, well, that's state level data. And again, I am when I've had people on and they talk about the state level data, I'm always saying, hey, look, they're just talking state. They're not talking units. Like there are obviously problems with very specific units, and those criticisms should be heard.
Yeah.
Because whatever benefit people got from wolf reintroduction, and let's be charitable and say there is a lot of benefit to the ecosystem, and you like saying, hey, look, I love these animals. That's great. It doesn't mean it's without a cost. Yeah. Right. And I think the first step is at the very least honoring that it costs somebody something is an important thing to do. Right. Yeah.
So, and when going back to how to fix it, management is key, but because I am talking about it from somebody who has spent,
It's part of your life.
the amount of people who have spent as much time as me in Idaho, hunting wolves is a tiny, tiny fraction of a percent.
Right.
Most of these people that will say, oh, kill them all, they're doing nothing to help with they're just getting pissed that they can't shoot an elk from their 4-wheeler. And like, I'm okay with people who just want to hunt like that. Like that's how they've been doing. And yeah, right. It's with elk numbers a lot lower and just changing their pattern.
Right.
It's not the same anymore. You're not going to be able to do that like you used to 25 years ago. But if you're going to complain about it, you got to either come up with a solution or fund a solution or do something. If you're just talking, you're doing nothing to help the problem, right? Like you can have an opinion on it, but if you're not doing anything, then what,
Right.
What's
Right.
it worth?
Right.
So opening up, and they've made good steps. Foundation for Wildlife Management has helped make these steps by extending seasons. You can get more tags now. That's changed. It used to be 1 tag, and then went to 2, then went to 5, and then it went to 10 if you had a trapping license, and then now I think it's unlimited, or basically. But it doesn't matter. They could
Right.
give every single hunter 100 wolf tags every year.
Right.
It's the same amount of wolves are getting killed every year. But you have to open up the seasons, the methods of take. It was a big controversy opening it up to, hunting them with, there was an exemption they did. You have to go get a little special permit for it. So you can hunt them with thermals. You can hunt them with dogs. There's a couple, there was other methods. Yeah. Well, I haven't killed one with a thermal, and I'm fairly successful wolf hunter, and I've spent a lot of time thermal hunting them, and I haven't killed one that way. But it's a good step to open up, extend the seasons, allow more trapping, because trapping is the most effective way. And like I said, they just cut a huge, significant part of the trapping season in fear of grizzlies being caught in wolf traps. Like zero science based. No. You could probably hold a tiny cub in a wolf trap, but an adult, it's hard to hold a wolf in a wolf trap. A bear is, dude, I have seen, wolves are a lot smaller than people think, first of all. Significantly smaller. Everyone thinks they're 200 pounds. They look like they're 200 pounds. A big male wolf weighs 100 pounds. There's 200-pound dogs.
Right.
Right. The strength that a 200-pound, or let's say a 150-pound bear is a smaller bear. It's probably the average bear shot, and I actually probably smaller than that. But 3-year-old 150-pound boar would absolutely demolish a wolf trap. And I'm talking about a black bear. Like you're not catching a grizzly in a wolf trap. That's the problem when you get people who actually, and you see this with all laws, they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, you see it with guns all the time. When politicians are talking about guns, I'm like, you just said AR stands for assault rifle. That right there, you're out.
Yeah, you're out.
You're out. You're out. Don't even
does
get
AK stand
anything.
for assault knife?
Yeah, literally. Like you don't even get an opinion if you
right.
don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
So, and that's the problem with lawmakers and the government making rules. These rules, the feds making these rules on things that they know nothing about. Like if you're not here, if you're not seeing it, if you're not in it, you don't know what you're talking about at all. So that rule was made by somebody who knows nothing about trapping. I guarantee it.
Right.
And so you have to extend the season. It's got to be year round, and it is in a lot of areas now. But you got to you have to make the only way to combat it, is to get more people out actively wolf hunting. Which I have so many buddies that hunt. All my friends hunt. That's my world. I'm in the hunting community. Very, very, very few of my buddies wolf hunt. Like almost none of them. I'm like, dude, quit complaining about
They probably don't want to be crying on day 69.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because it takes a lot of money and time and stuff. So I get it, but still, like, if you have an issue,
you got to
go
be part
do
of the
something
solution.
about it.
Gotta be part of the solution.
Exactly.
Right.
So and maybe that's even donating to the foundation. And that's why I like the Foundation for Wildlife Management so much, is because to reimburse these guys, dude, they're not making money. I have not made money by shooting wolves. I've gotten, $2,000 check, whatever. I didn't make any money. I might have broke even if I was lucky for the season, maybe, with fuel and expenses.
Yeah,
of
that's if
hunting
you
it.
save all your receipts and you're like, hey, it cost me this much. And
I might have.
Good job. Thanks for volunteering your time.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, but what's important about that is it's sportsman. You don't even have to wolf hunt. The first step you can do if you have a problem with wolves in Idaho is become a member. If you get lucky and you are deer hunting and you happen to shoot a wolf, yes, you can be reimbursed expenses. But what it's mainly doing is guys like me and all the other guys in the state that are spending the time trying to kill wolves.
Right. It's supporting that.
It's supporting them.
Right. Right. And not even supporting them from a classic sense, like, here, let me do all, like, you're not prospering from it. You're just being reimbursed slightly for your expenses.
Yes.
So you don't have the burden.
I tell you right now, no one is making money killing wolves.
Right.
You're not you're not like, oh, what my salary, I'm making 50 grand a year killing wolves. Nobody's killing that many wolves. And the time you spend and the money you spend, because it's so difficult, you're not making money doing it.
Right.
You could break even if you were super successful. That'd be best case scenario, is breaking even.
Right.
But
that would be the perfect scenario.
And the only way you could, but to get people to continue to trap all year, like, these people have lives and a salary and a job, and they can't just keep dumping 10, 15 grand a year on expenses. Like, and then, but you need those guys out there. You have to have those guys.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who are, I hate the kill 'em all people. I do not like that. It doesn't help when other people hear that. I also have a different take on it because I've actually done something about it and actively hunted them, especially in areas that I elk hunt. Like, those are the packs that I want to hunt.
Right.
And so I've never been a fan of the guys like kill them all. Like, first of all, you're never gonna, and second of all, they're already here, And like I said, besides poisoning them, they're here forever. But let's manage them. So, I mean, our state gets so much money from deer and elk tag sales, both resident and non-resident. And that money goes back into improving, it should be going back into improving habitat and, improving populations. So why wouldn't we do that on every aspect, The funds aren't really there, but it's like, it is, again, it's a totally different thing talking about the funds and mismanagement of other wildlife. I mean, and this happens with every state. I know hunters in every state. I hunt multiple other states, and everyone,
everyone has problems.
Has issues with. I mean, I live in Melba, which is right outside the Owahis, which is Unit 40, and there's a 2-point hunt. This is a perfect example. A lot of guys do this forky hunt. You're shooting a young buck, little 2-point, right? Which is fine. Like, if that's what you want to do, like, I'm not like, oh, you can only shoot a trophy. I'm all for it if that's what you want to do. But that unit could have like so many more giant deer that people, especially non-residents, more of them would put in the state to get a tag in that unit, which in return makes Idaho more money that they can put into habitat. So by not having the numbers and the certain types of quality of animals, especially that people want to pay money, to come hunt, because there's money involved into it. Like, there has to be. Right. We have to have
you
money.
have to fund it somehow.
Yes.
Like, I actually, years ago, I had this this student that was like way into, she was talking about, she wanted to be like a zoologist or something. And I was like, yeah, it's always curious to me how, you know, handing out hunting tags is actually good for populations. She was like, what? Like, well, like imagine a giraffe, right? Like if you hand out no hunting tags for like giraffes, then you're going to have people that are going to poach the giraffes and nobody to protect the giraffes. If you hand out 2 hunting tags at $1 million per tag, now you got $2 million to protect the other giraffes. And it was like, it didn't, and that was obviously a ridiculous example, but just, hey, look, this is the reality. Like you have to generate revenue somehow in a reasonable manner
100%.
to run programs that conserve what everybody wants, which is viable habitats, you know, accessible hunting, all of these things. Like that all takes money.
Yeah, it's anything, right? I work for a nonprofit, and they have people, when you get to a certain level, you have to hire people. You have to take some of that money, you know, and put it into a salary for people to work because it gets so big and it takes so much. Like it wouldn't work if there wasn't any employees.
Right. Like if you just
like all the money can't just go.
Yeah. It can't just like
how it works.
sprout out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like you need a communications director.
Yes.
You need like an executive director. You can't have quality people that are just getting after it occasionally when they have time.
In a perfect world, yes, all the money donated would just go to whatever outreach or whatever thing it was, but that's not how it works.
Right. And you want to be responsible with the funds
100%.
provided. But at some point you have to realize, look, if you want professionals, you're going to have to pay. That's what makes them professionals, right? If you want high quality people that are going to pursue this end as effectively as possible, you got to pay some money for it. Like you got to generate revenue. Yeah. There are a lot of things. Zach, listen to me. You're the best. I so appreciate you coming up. I know you drove a while to get here. I've really enjoyed this. I gotta go get my kids at water polo practice. Like I just realized like when the lights turned off, I'm like, oh my God, it's already 5 o'clock. So listen, please come back again after the season, whenever.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing, your perspective. It's us taking the problem into our own hands. Like just what I do here. I dislike the lack of honest conversation.
Yeah.
So that's what this platform is. And you're participating in that and helping me in that way. And that's beautiful. Like this is what we need more of. So again, I appreciate you. Thank you for doing what you do. And thank you for coming in, sir.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com.